Welcome to Circle Podcast, brought to you by Circle Sanctuary, one of the oldest nature spirituality churches in the United States, connecting people of nature-centered paths around the world. Join us throughout the week for a variety of shows discussing various topics, celebrating the divine in all of its forms through nature worship, rituals, education, and building bridges of community. Welcome to Urban Unwitches, a podcast to educate, inform, and expand the pagan community. Please join our Discord channel, Urban Unwitches Podcast. Follow us on TikTok at Urban Unwitches, and listen to all our past podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform. You can also join us on YouTube at Urban Unwitches. Now, back to the show. So, what's going on with you?
So what's going on with me? Let's talk about tariffs. Let's have a conversation about tariffs and how if I had hair, I would no longer have hair. So for anyone out there who has any interest whatsoever, tariffs, because I'm not allowed to say this at work, heaven help me, because that would be a corporate statement. Tariffs are a tax on imported things that we pay. Now, anytime someone in a position of extreme authority decides that they want to put tariffs on things, the effect is immediate in places like the stock market and in some markets. But if those goods have not arrived yet, they're not immediate. So cars, for instance, automotive. If everybody out there is like, there's going to be an automotive tariff, I should go out and buy cars. Don't. Because I work in sales when I'm not here. And it has been Black Friday for the last week. Listen, I can juggle spinning plates. I'm good at that. I can tap dance like I'm in Riverdance, right? But the problem is, even I draw the line at being quintupled up. That's where I am selling 5 cars at one time to 5 different purchasers. That's a lot, even.
Wow.
And we've, I'm at that point now where, like, after the last week, I have these next 2 days off, and I'm going to enjoy every fleeting second of my time off because I'm old now and do not have the stamina of a young man, and I don't want to die from clinical exhaustion. So that's how I've been. How about you?
I went LARPing last weekend.
Oh, adventures in
I had
LARP.
fun.
How-
I'm really, so LARP is not a game if you've never D&D'd or anything like that. It is not a game for the faint of heart because you don't have any context for anything that happens in the game. And so I have spent a year learning the game. And the last 2 events, I've been like, I know what's happening. Like, I understand what's going on. And I was able to call a dodge in battle because I remembered I had it, and I was able to call a resist so I didn't take damage. And so it's getting funner, if that makes any sense. I loved it before, but now it's really, I'm getting to where I'm having fun because I can remember all these things, and I can participate in a way that I haven't been able to participate. So one of the things we do is downtimes, and my downtimes have consisted of, I'm a bard, so I go walking around playing and singing for money. That's what I do in my downtimes. I have 3 of these. And then after this last game, I actually am going to do something useful during my downtimes other than walk around begging for money. So I'm very excited about that. I will only do that once. I have 2 other downtimes that have nothing to do with that, and I'm very glad. And I also have taken a crafting skill that's going to make me a lot of money so I can afford to have the armor that I'm about to make. So, there are things. There's a whole economy going on there that I have to make sure I'm not a poor, broke performer. So that I can have the armor. And the best thing that happened was I got a long sword. So this is the sword that existed before, the short sword. So you can see, like, it's twice the length. So I'm very excited to show you my new sword. This is my new
Look
sword.
at that clip closer. Is that like a woven, like a texture woven
This is
sword?
paracord of some type that
Ooh,
she's
yeah.
the that has a design on it.
Hmm.
That the person who made it, it was a woman, um, did that for me, and I chose blues deliberately because that's my color in game. My color palette is blues and greens, so green, blues.
Hmm.
But I'm going to cover this one like I've done my little short sword, and I'm also going to crochet an end for the ball. But I've named this sword Dandelion because
Okay.
it poofs you.
Oh, I see what you did there.
And so I'm going to make a dandelion cover on the ball of this particular sword, but I'm very excited about my new sword. And this should encourage everybody who's listening to go find on TikTok our full show so you can see what I'm talking about. And I still have my temporary tattoos on. They're slowly coming off that I wear. I wear leaf tattoos all over and they're slowly coming off. They've stayed on more this time because it was cold and I ended up wearing long sleeves and long pants the whole time
Oh, gotcha.
because it was
Well,
cold here.
well, also a little PSA for those of us listening out there in the grand world of the interwebs that have never D&D'd or LARPed. Though at this point, if you haven't, it's probably through some form of active choice because it's everywhere now. Thank you, COVID, the giver of gifts. The D&D and LARPing is just as nerdy and just as dorky and just as socially embarrassing as you think it will be until you start doing it, and then you don't care anymore, and then it becomes the funnest, most freeing thing you've ever done. I am from a generation in which Dungeons and Dragons were played by certain types of people. There was a perception in the world of the people who played Dungeons and Dragons, mostly because of nonsense that came out of the 80s and early 90s. But after several decades, I lost a bet and was forced to play D&D and then realized, oh, cool, new addiction. So if you haven't tried it, you should go out and then you'll understand what we're talking about, specifically when it comes to the context of not understanding the story, because you don't. It is like a soap
Right.
opera and you've missed the first two seasons. You have to get
Yes.
that. Yeah, there's binging.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what's really happened in the last two games. They they were rounding up plots. So this game has existed 3 years. So the first 2 years had a plot line that ended after I joined. So I never understood those games. We would go kill somebody. I would be like, who are we killing? Why are we killing these people? I don't know. I'm just here with my little sword. That's all I got. Um, and they started new plot lines 2 games ago. So now I'm at the beginning of plot lines instead of at the end. And I think that is also helping because I'm not wondering what's going on. I know what's going on because I'm involved in it right at the beginning. So it was fun. And my best friend was a monster. In LARP, you can be a player character or a non-player character. If you're a non-player character, you're likely a monster and you get to try to kill your friends, with a sword. That's what happens. And
Giving
so,
into a feeling we often experience from time to
yes,
time, but never
yes.
allow
So,
ourselves to.
so my best friend and her daughter were played non-player characters this time, and so my niece chased me around with a sword and giggling,
That is wonderful.
and I talked to Samuel, my son, and I think if I keep talking up LARP, I might get him to come visit. And I told him, I said, come be a non-player character. Like, just, you don't have to have a character. Just go and you'll be the character they tell you to be. And it's fun. Right.
You
And
could
he
be a
was like,
monster. Like, Daniel, you could go be a monster and chase people around. It would even
that's
feel fun.
right.
The
And he was like,
manifestation of the
oh,
dream.
it really does sound like fun, Mom. I'm like, it is a lot of fun. So I'm working on him. I'm working on my Samuel to get him to come one time. I'm hoping because I would love somebody who's in my world to come to one of my LARPs just to experience what it is that I experience. It's, you know what
The
I mean?
You've just set up something because we have frequent flyer miles. And if you think I will not secretly fly into the hotness that is the Southeast and show up in my full regalia. I even have a Halloween costume that'll work. I've been Gandalf the Gay 11 times. I will show up. Oh yeah, he's got
Well,
a full voice and everything.
well, I would love it if someone in my world would come in, because then there would be context for a lot of what I talk about. My my husband has learned to, uh-huh, yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds good. Right.
Mhm,
Was that good or bad?
mhm.
Like, you
Absolutely.
know.
And this is a great point to jump in for our listeners because they're here to listen to us talk about paganism and all this other stuff and these spiritual experiences we've had. Talking about LARP and D&D is very similar to talking about any kind of peak spiritual experience you've ever had. You feel like you sound insane while you're describing it. That feeling never goes away.
So
You
at this LARP, they had a guest bard. So this is somebody who just came in for one game, but he's a longtime player. A bunch of people knew him. So he was able to come at it a really high level bard person. And he and I sat down to introduce myself in character, and he stopped being in character and said, which by the way, you have to put your fist on your hand if you're out of character. So he goes, "Hey, I heard you were a pagan. Is that true?" And I go, "Yeah, I am a pagan. Why do you ask?" And he goes, "I'm a pagan. I heard you were poly. Is that true?" "Yes, I am poly." So let me tell you, the pagan poly people are all over LARP, all over LARP. And this guy and I had a 20-minute conversation that led him to go. Um, he said something about how all of the people he dates end up being part of the Dark Mother. And I have a raven's wing tattoo.
Mhm.
I can't, it doesn't do right. I can't show it. There it is. That's for the Morgan. And I just lifted my shirt up and went, "Oh, like this?"
Yeah.
He was like, he said, "I can't get away from him." I was like, "We're everywhere."
Repeat
So,
patterns, yeah. I actually had a really amazing experience at work the other day. There have been a couple of
cool.
times. So I work for a large when I'm not podcasting and drawing and painting and writing and basically just being painfully poorly creative. Um, a lot of alliteration. I work for a large auto retailer, and the amount of people I see is a lot. And the other day, I had this amazing couple come in, and you get a feel. It's kind of like 30 years ago when you were gay, you kind of got to feel like your gaydar had to be a finely tuned thing
Mm-hmm.
because you had to
Mm-hmm.
be real careful before you had an open conversation. And so they come in, I meet with the husband first, wife is away, great people, super fun, super energetic. We had a wonderful time. I love talking to people. That's my favorite thing in the whole world. And this was a great conversation. Then they come back, and this time he brings the missus, and she is just as awesome as he is. And we have this amazing conversation. And it turns out they are largely solitary, self-taught pagans. And I actually mentioned our podcast and the whole thing, and they're super excited. So if they ever listen to this podcast, yes, you know who you are, and I'm talking about you. And I had a great time. But it was wonderful how that networking happens where you don't
Yep.
expect. Like I had an older couple come in and she was wearing a Hecate's wheel.
Oh, yeah.
And I keep glancing at it and I guess she notices me glancing at it. I'm like, just so you know, that is one of the prettiest renderings of a Hecate's wheel I have probably ever seen. It had some artistic flourishes I hadn't seen before. And the fact that I knew what it was
Mm.
made her entire day. It was
Yep.
wonderful. So,
Yep.
yeah, we are out there, we're everywhere. And a lot of times there are very subtle hints, but
Yep.
noticing pagans in every day is not what today is about. What is today about, Miss Dia?
Well, just for the record, gaydar, it was a thing. Paydar is what you call it when you can seek out pagans. It's paydar.
Yes, it
Just so
sounds
you
like
know.
a pay site, but it's not.
It's not. It's Paydar,
It's an extra step.
pagan radar.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the rest of the Wheel of the Year. Now, here's the deal. We did a podcast where we talked about the Wheel of the Year. We talked about its history. We talked about where it came from. We talked about different myths surrounding it. And we got up to Yule. So we did Samhain and Yule. And then we realized that it was going to be a 2-hour podcast. And so we cut it off. And then we listened to the second half that we made that same day, and it was terrible. So we have decided to redo it. So if this doesn't sound like a continuation, it's not.
Yeah.
We totally said, just put that out and we'll do it again. So we're going to talk today about Ostara through Mabon. No, Imbolc through Mabon. Imbolc through Mabon, right. And if you missed last time, I just want to quickly say that you can celebrate on given days for the Sabbats, or you can celebrate on astrological Sabbat dates. And you can look these astrological Sabbat dates up. So you'll hear me refer as we go through to the astrological timing and the given dates. It doesn't matter. We have a whole long discussion about it in the first podcast. You can hear it. But yes, so and we're starting with Imbolc, and Imbolc is one of the few given to a goddess, given to Bridge, Brigitte, Brie. How many names can you name for Bridget?
A lot. I will admit that. So we had a previous associate in the group that I was in before who, even though she was not a devotee of Briege, she brought Briege up all the time, and she pronounced it Briege, which is one of literally dozens. The goddess Bridget, however you choose to engage with her, is one of the most prevalent goddesses worshipped throughout time. The Catholics even made her a saint. She has been decanonized, and her eternal flame is no longer a holy site for the Catholics, but it is tended by pagans. And is it Killarney, County Cork? It's somewhere in Ireland. I'm not sure.
It's somewhere in Ireland. Yeah, I'm not sure where, but it is.
But the sad thing is that I felt so bad, I actually kind of meditated and gave an offering to Briege after this. Somebody came up with the joke that if you have pesky stuck on smelly spirits, you can use for Briege and clear it out. And I laughed really hard, and I felt super guilty afterwards because she didn't really she didn't deserve that, but it did stick for a while. It was a thing. So one of the practitioners in my old group, she has a mixture that she uses if she's trying to cleanse a house, and the label on it says Febreze.
That is sacrilegious and at the same time hilarious. It's very, very, I am very conflicted on the inside of my soul now.
Yeah, me too, because it's like God's greater spirits, however you want to look at them, they're deserving of respect. They're way bigger than we are. I like to think they also have a sense of humor. I think laughter is the language of the gods, or the poetry of the gods.
Absolutely.
That being said, I did inquire, and she's like, no, even though the label says Febreze, it is created properly, it is devoted to her, it is done in all the traditional ways. She's just got that funny little label. So you can have humor, just don't take it too far.
And Imbolc starts at the sun at 15 degrees Aquarius, or February 1st. That's the timing we're talking about here. And this is the time of Bridget's crosses that you make with wheat. And last time we had a very interesting discussion about corn and corn dollies, which are also used at this time of year. And I asked Kyler then, do you make corn dollies when the corn is dry, or when it is just been, is still green, so to speak? And Kyler then went on a journey, and I'd love for him to retell that story because it is funny, and I have something to say about it.
Okay, so I love your faith in me that you think I can remember the journeys that I go on. That is not my felt sense. It's not my personal truth, but I honor that between us as friends. Could you prompt me?
Sure.
Which topic?
It was right. It was the realization of what corn is and what corn is not.
Yes. So, I feel real bad because I actually shared that conversation with my husband afterwards, and I got some giggles. So for those of you who are reading like classic Wiccan books of shadows and books on observances around the Sabbats, and there are some great ones out there. Anytime they refer to John Barleycorn or the green corn or making corn dollies, corn, as we know it in the US, it's maize. It comes from a plant that is indigenous here. Much like pumpkins, they weren't indigenous to the British Isles or to Europe, so they didn't have corn. They called wheat corn. Corn is another name for wheat in Europe and specifically the British Isles and English. So when I was younger, I did attempt to try and make corn dollies out of actual corn, and it was considerably harder than making it out of like chaff or raffia or things like that. It's yeah, yeah.
So
Really
Kyler
tricky.
explains this, that corn is not the same here as it is in the British Isles, and I go, huh, yeah. Now I feel real stupid because I didn't put that together at all. I knew it, but I didn't know it. We talk about grok a lot. Grok is to really know. So I didn't grok the idea that the corn here and the corn there were not the same kind of corn. And what confuses me is this, and I will say this about corn dollies. They do look like they're made in the US. If you look at the bigger ones, they are made from clearly made from the
Yeah.
shucks of corn here in the US, and you can clearly see that from the fiber and the way that they look. It's clear that they're made from corn here. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I do think that the gods see the agriculture that we're part of, and that we would adopt that seems to be a natural thing. So I just want to say, definitely don't think that you can't use green corn to make your corn dolly, and they would be the shucks of the corn that you would use to do this. But we also talked about the Bridget's crosses, and it's hard to get wheat that is green February. So we always use dried wheat, but you want to put it in a bathtub of hot water for about 15 to 20 minutes, maybe more. And it softens up the fiber so that when you bend it, it doesn't break. And so you're able to bend and weave the breeze crosses without them breaking. So that's my recommendation if you're in the States, because you're not going to find wheat that is green in February. You're just not. And we do that. We do the breeze crosses because it was fire insurance back
Mhm.
in the day. They would hang it over their door as protection of the fire from fire, because you had a thatch roof and a wooden structure, and then a big hearth that you ate on and slept on, that you ate on and you kept heat on, and it was on all the time, and it wasn't like it was something that put out. So it was fire insurance. And today we use it as a way to bless and cleanse the space. And my coven, we burn them, the old breeze crosses, and then make the new ones and charge them, is what we do at this time of year. And I also do oiling of all cast iron at this time of year. So I make a nice oil with some frankincense and myrrh drops and a really high quality olive oil. And then I just rub all my cast iron. I have a big cast iron cauldron, and I rub it down, and it keeps it from rusting. It also keeps it kind of in really good condition. It keeps that black patina that you associate with
Mhm.
cold iron. So that is what we were talking about. Did we miss anything?
I'm going to jump in just a couple of little points. One, this is your yearly reminder that no matter how much you love your grandmother, please don't scrub the patina off of her cast iron. You will be cut out of the will.
Yes.
It's a thing. I actually just saw something come along my feed on Instagram where someone's like, I love my grandmother, but she's got arthritis, so I scrubbed all of her favorite pans for her. And like that kid's entire life's worth of investment in
Mm,
those pans was gone. And that was basically probably going to be their inheritance. So don't do that. You want the patina. You want that kind of rough texture on your cast
yes.
iron, because that means
Hmm.
it does right. It cooks the way it should. Another thing, and I really love that you brought this up, because last time I think we forgot to talk about how you can kind of use anything that you want. So I have one of the prettiest besoms I've ever seen. It took me a long time to make it. I do work with wood somewhat, and I made it in the completely traditional style. I don't take the fronds off the bottom because, at least not with kids around. Learn about besoms, and you will know what I mean. Um, Mine is what's called a Florida broom. So I'm from Florida. My aunt is probably the Martha Stewart arts and crafts goddess of the Tri-County area. And so I grew up with this idea of a Florida broom. And your besom can be indicative of this. And this kind of goes right along with the corn dollies. Use the materials that are around you. Ours is an organic religion. That doesn't mean that you pay twice the amount for eggs, though today you do. That means you use what is there. Witchcraft is practical. At its core, it's practical. If you're
Right.
looking at a spell or a recipe or anything that says you need a golden bladed knife and you have to cut the herbs with a scythe made of selenite or something, I've seen some really interesting recipes out there. Be practical at the end of the day. And if you've got a celebration of 1,000 pagans coming to a festival, make your corn dolly out of corn. It's bigger. And at that size, you can work on it. Like, use your materials to fit it. And so, like, even though I live in Washington now, I have my corn besom, my Florida broom, as my besom. And it's wonderful. It's always a conversation piece because it's got things in it you don't find in Washington.
Right.
So, yeah, always use the materials that are there and never feel like you're doing something right or wrong. There is no solid, big right or wrong in the craft. It's what works best for you.
Have you seen my besom?
I think so. Show me.
Okay, so first of all, it's beautiful and it has a split. The wood grew up and then split to create the handle and grew back together. So
Ooh,
it literally has a handle, if you will. But it was made by a traditional corn broom maker. So he made corn brooms. That's what he did. And we found him at a craft fair when we were out of state. And he was charging $25 for a full size corn broom. We bought the man out. He could not figure out what we were going to do with these brooms. But I was on the phone calling everybody I know. You want a corn broom? Because I got them right here. They're
I-
25 bucks.
yeah. Oh my, and
Send me
verse in a
send me a
crowd.
Zelle right now. And I'll buy you this broom.
Oh my God,
So
that's
we came
awesome.
home with so many brooms, we had to strap them to the top of the car. That's how you know you're a witch, y'all. That's how you
Yeah.
know.
Instead of riding the broom is riding you, but it's still flying at 60 miles an hour. Yeah.
Yes.
This is the Georgia version
So,
of that A24
yes.
movie, The Witch. And there's her cackle.
There it is. I do cackle. The other thing I do, speaking of things that I do, I noticed when I was watching all these back as I'm editing them, because I do the editing, that I itch my head all the time. So if you want a cool game to play with alcohol, do it every time I itch my head. You'll be really out of it by the time the podcast is over, because evidently I do that all the time. And I want you to know I have seen a dermatologist and we are fixing this problem because I refuse to continue to do that. And it reminded me of it because I started scratching my head.
Read
The
about
next one.
state and federal laws regarding consumption of alcohol.
Absolutely. The next one we're going to talk about is Ostara. It's the sun at 1 degrees Aries, or March 20th or 21st. And yes, y'all, it is also known as Easter for the Christian religion. And you do dye eggs, sure enough. And we
Yeah.
talked about eggs and hiding eggs in the field as a way to fertilize the field before you planted, and that was a pagan tradition that kind of held on. And so the priest, looking to stamp out these pagan traditions, started Easter egg hunts with: go out in the field, get as many eggs as you can, bring them to us, and we'll give you chocolate, because the priests had chocolate. Not everybody had chocolate. It was a priest thing. They brought it back over from the Americas and South America specifically, and that's where it came from. And so that's how we ended up with Easter egg hunts. So we typically don't do Easter egg hunts. What we do is spirit animal hunts, and we take hollow eggs and we buy little trinkets that are animals, and we stick the animal in there, and then we'll print out a little, this is the information about that spirit animal, and we'll stick it in. And that's one of the ways you can still do an egg hunt, but have it be a spiritually driven egg hunt, versus honoring the destruction of pagan ritual. What else do we know about Ostara? Oh, bunnies, because it's a fertility religion, y'all.
Yeah. Also, just so Ostara and Imbolc do kind of tie in together, specifically in Ireland and Scotland, and that is a really rich mythological history. So I would strongly recommend people who are interested in kind of the mythology behind where the traditions come from, look at the battle, the struggle between Brigid, Brige, Bridie, however you want to pronounce it, and Uncula, or the Cailleach. So the Imbolc is when so the Cailleach is the hag of winter. She's the goddess of winter, that cold blue ice on the ground winter. And then at Imbolc, you kind of hit the turning of the ways. And then at Easter, it is the coming of Brigid or Eostra or Easter, all these different like spring goddesses into the fullness of their power. So you've got like a lot of different cultures kind of doing the same thing in spring. And so a lot of our traditions are kind of a conglomerate, an amalgamation of all of them. But those stories are some of the prettiest that I've encountered. They're really, really pretty, and they show Bridget falling in love with the Cailleach's son and their journey to be together and pushing back against his mother's power and all that. It's a really interesting journey for people who are interested.
Is that in the Mabogonian?
No, the Mabinogion is Welsh, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
This is going to be more. So you've got different variations of Bridget across cultures. So Scotland has the Cailleach. Ireland also has the Uncula. They're just different pronunciations. Listen, folks, I am trying my American best to pronounce anything that is descended from the Celtic language groups. Okay, I try. Consonants are insanity. Vowels are just willy-nilly. I try. I never succeed. Yeah, I gave up on trying to come up with like craft names in Gaelic a really long time ago because they're super pretty, but they don't sound the same. But definitely look at those, and even though you'll never be able to properly pronounce those goddesses' names, it's a really cool story.
Cool. I forgot for a minute that it was Welsh and not, but the Welsh should have a brief figure as well. They just may not have it just may not be in the Mabogonian, but yeah.
There's so you've got Rhiannon. I don't know if Rhiannon. I'm not as well versed in Welsh. That's not been my home place, but there is Manweven and Rhiannon.
Right.
They've got their own deities, but there is crossover because there was cultural sharing between those groups. They lived really close to each other. So yeah, but the Welsh cycles, the Ulster cycles, the Mabinogion, definitely read those because they have some really cool stories in there. God of the Underworld switching with a king. They trade places for a year, and yeah, no, there's lots of fun stuff happening.
With the mentioning of Celtic Isles, and this is just a reminder if you haven't heard the first part of this, the fire festivals all come from the Celtic or Gallic Isles, which include Great Britain, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and also part of France, just for the record. The part that's next to Great Britain was a Gallic center as well, ancient Gallic center. And so that's what we're talking about. The cross-quarter days, which are not fire festivals, and we'll tell you which ones we're talking about as we go through. But those cross-quarter days are more Nordic, Germanic origins. So it's put together these two different cultures and to make this one wheel that we call the Wheel of the Year. And Imbolc is a fire festival, is one of the fire festivals. No, yes, no. Ostara is a fire festival. No, wait.
Beltane. I think it's Imbolc and
It's yes.
yes.
It's Imbolc, Lughnassadh, Samhain, and Beltane. Those are the fire festivals. And those are also between the midsummer and the equinoxes. So midwinter equinox, midsummer equinox, midwinter. So that's kind of how it goes. Midwinter would be Yule, and Ostara is the equinox, is the spring equinox. So, and I always remember that because of the balancing an egg. If you hit the right time, you can balance an egg and it will stand up on its own.
Right.
But it has to do with the tilt of the earth and the timing of the earth. So you have to do it astrologically correct, but you can do it. So yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Also,
And did I? Uh-huh.
well, I was also just going to jump in because I would love to give our listeners a little heads up on something that stumped me for years.
Sure.
It really confused me. So when we say the term Celts, the Celtic peoples, I want to be very clear. If you are researching them, like if you fall down the Wikipedia rabbit holes, if you start looking for Celtic gods and goddesses and all that, the Celts were a huge group of peoples, okay? They were at one point over pretty much all of Europe, controlling an area almost as big as what the Roman Empire at its height would control. But they were kind of interesting as a people. They were different than a lot of other conquerors because they would move into an area, they would conquer, they would kind of instill Celtic rules, but then they would kind of absorb the gods of the area. So
Mm-hmm.
when you look up Celtic gods, you're going to see a lot of the Irish, you're going to see a lot of the Welsh, you're going to see a lot of this back and forth, and there's no like consistent line through. And the reason for that is um, the ancient Celts and the Celts that we have today, or in the last 500 years, very different. They
Mm-hmm.
have very little in the way of cultural inheritance from the actual ancient Celts. The Romans did a really good job with the favorite Roman game, and that game is called Stabby Stab Stab. The legions hunted down the Druids, and the Druids were the Celtic law knowers. They had an oral tradition, they didn't write anything down. So when the last Druid died, we lost a lot about Celtic myth. And a lot of our Sabbats are heavily influenced by them. So Gardner and other synths have kind of borrowed from the different regions to give us this full-fledged like year mythology. And it's really pretty, it's very beautiful, but it is a tapestry. And if you, like myself, are a little type A when it comes to your research, just be aware of that. The modern Celtic countries are modern Celtic because they have chosen in the 18th century to identify as Celtic. And that's where a lot of that comes from. And it's also a language group thing, but it's not the direct myth. We don't actually have a lot of direct Celtic myth. We have their descendants myths.
Right. That's right. And I'm glad you pointed that out. I was also going to point out a book. I'm sure I quoted it in the last one, Kindling the Celtic Spirit by Mara Freeman. It's a great book. She's from the Celtic Isles and she kind of put it together, the Scotch and the Irish and the Welsh and all the pagan rites and rituals that have survived and how they interrelate to this Wheel of the Year. And so it's a really good read. If you come across it, you should definitely buy Kindling the Celtic Spirit. It is a great, great book about the Sabbats. And that is one thing we didn't talk about last time. We didn't talk about good Sabbat books. And there's a Sabbat book out there that, how do we say, is not as well researched. Let's say that, as it could be. And this is back in, when you talk about books from the 90s, you have to remember that the level of scholarship is not the same as it is today. And so if you're looking at books from the 90s and the 80s, especially, you're going to be looking at books where they're not as well researched, they're not as well documented, and which is why I recommend Kindling the Celtic Spirit so much, because I know like there's a whole section on her research that she's done. So that one I would recommend. Anything by Matthew and Oh, the name just went right out of my head. Shoot. Um, shoot.
You can post a
It'll
booklet.
come to me. We'll come back with it. It'll come back. And I'll let you know. But there's a Celtic couple that has done a lot of research, and they are scholars. And anything that they've written, um, definitely you want to get onto them because they've done the research, and it's more likely to not come from wishful thinking, and more likely to come from steady sources. Okay, so we did
Something to be aware of.
Imbolc and Imbolc and Ostara. And now we're on to, I've lost my page. We're
Okay.
on to Beltane. You want to talk
Yes.
about Beltane? Beltane is 15 degrees Taurus or May 1st. And it's also the date that our podcast goes live. Woohoo!
It's being birthed there. Um, yeah, for some pagans, it's always Beltane. It's Beltane. That was the first phrase I learned with my very first pagan gathering. I went to a festival, and it was for Beltane, and that's what I kept hearing. All of my friends kept saying, for some pagans, it's always Beltane. I didn't understand until I got to the campsite, and then I understood. Beltane is the moment at which the world has quickened and becomes fecund and fertile and all of that. This is an organic religion based around agrarian cultures, which means that things have to reproduce. And the focus of that energy is going to be Beltane. It tends to be warm, and animals are in rut, and people are generally in rut as well. It's sometimes hard to talk about Beltane without a little bit of the high color coming in.
Yeah, and this is where we departed into some, if you're a new pagan, things you should know. Things you should know. If you go to a Beltane festival, you need to ask about the pole and whether or not it looks like a male body part or not. You might want to know that before you go. Many of them do, and they're painted green. Mine is not. Mine's topped with roses and flowers. But ours is also cold iron, and we just talked about cold iron is at Ostara, but the reason ours is, y'all, is because we're a practical religion, and I didn't want to cut down a tree every year to make a Beltane maypole. And so we found one that was the right size that we just happened to have lying around, and it allowed us to make a topper that could only make it once. I get it out, I fluff it out, I maybe add some things to it if it needs it, but I don't have to worry about it. Kyler is now trying not to laugh at my term use of fluff. And
That's a divine irony, my dear.
so we do that, but we're a practical religion, and my husband is also an engineer, and so if you ever want to know how tall your pole should be, how long your ribbon should be, hit me up. It's urbanunwitches@gmail.com. I will send you the mathematical formula and the drawing that goes with it, that my husband put together. It's a very Tony thing to do, and he's done it, and don't worry about it. We can hook you up. So there is that. The other thing I was going to say is the weaving of the ribbons for Beltane is as important as the pole, because it indicates the weaving of magic, the weaving of fertility, the weaving of beginnings. It is a sacred dance that is done, and if it's done right, you end up with this beautiful woven ribbon installation, if you will, because we used to leave ours up for a little while after because it was so pretty. We were like, I don't want to take that down. We did the dance right. We got the pattern right. So yeah, that is one of my favorite things about Beltane. And this now, traditionally, you would use white and red ribbon, one for male, one for female, but we actually use whatever ribbon we have available. Somebody gave us a box of ribbon, so we're still using that ribbon up.
Well, a lot of different traditions have gone to just multicolored as a way of showing the whole spectrum of human sexual identity. And you are not the only group that I know of that uses a cold iron pole. And there is a practice out there where you burn the maypole.
Mm-hmm.
that you cut down. Well, there was a group that they liked the symbolism of the pole surviving. And so they use the cold iron. When they burn it, they put the pole that they use, and theirs is not super tall, but they would put it in the fire, and then the ribbons would burn, but then the pole would continue, showing the fertility, humanity, the world, all of that continues. That pole is just part of that cycle, but there is that thread that continues on. So you can have
Mhm.
lots of different symbolism, but the maypole is always a fun time.
Always a fun time. And this also gets into why we have June weddings, because we're
Mhm.
about to go into Litha. But let's talk about June weddings, because really it has to do with Beltane and not with Litha, which is the next Sabbath that we're going to talk about. There were Beltane weddings, and they lasted for a night, and then they lasted longer if there was a celebratory child from that night of marriage. And so that's where June weddings came from. And it's why the Catholic Church, you said to this day.
So it has definitely relented in the last, bit. But there for centuries, the Catholic Church would not perform a June wedding because by the time you have Beltane and that night happens, biologically speaking, it's usually 4 to 6 weeks before a woman knows whether or not she's quickened with life on that most auspicious of nights. But given social constraints, with the advent of Catholicism, the old Celtic mores went away, the old cultural mores went away, and she had to get hitched. She had to get pregnant, or not pregnant, she got pregnant. She had to get married real quick. And the
Right.
church would not oversee a June wedding. And it was a
Right.
way of enforcing socially, hey, you can't go do this. Um, it was
Right.
definitely it was definitely a problem for a lot of people. Now the church doesn't really have an issue with people coupling on Beltane. It's not as much of a social directive, but it was an issue
Right.
for a long time.
Right. And the other thing we talked about last time that I think is important, again, in the interest of if you are new to the craft, terms you should be aware of. If someone asks you to go greenwooding, they mean for you to do that naked and have a good time doing it. So just so you know, greenwooding is a term. If you aren't clear by what I've just said, you should look it up. And the other one is sharing water. I actually went to a pagan gathering and this guy said, "Would you like to share water?" And I wasn't, the way he said it and intimated that it was more than just he was going to give me a bottled water. And my high priest at the time said, "She doesn't want to do that." And the guy said, "Oh, okay." And he walked away. And my priest told me what share water meant. And I went, "You're right. I didn't want to do that. Thank you very much."
Remind me, last time, did we talk about where sharing water comes from?
I don't think that we did. And
Okay.
it's an important place. It comes
Yep.
from Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein.
Mhm.
And it is part of that book's religious rights. And that's where share water came from. And a lot of people, especially in the United States, this is not necessarily true when you get into Europe, but in the United States, Stranger in a Strange Land, you cannot overstate its importance to American pagans and how much of it has seeped into our subconscious without us knowing it. So if you've ever heard someone say the God in me salutes the God in you, or the goddess in me salutes the goddess in you, came from Robert Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land. The idea we talked earlier today about grok, to really know something, not just to know it, but to know it. Grok comes right out of Stranger in a Strange Land, Robert Heinlein. Sharing water comes right out of there. And I feel like I'm missing something else.
Well, there's so many in there. The If you ever hear somebody define humanity as the animal who laughs,
Mm,
Um, that's another big one that's come out. It's less popular, but for people who really got into the mythos of it, one of the reasons it's in pagan culture is it inspired. It came out at a time when a lot of pagans were kind of splintering and doing their own thing, and it inspired a whole group of these people during like that flower power movement and that
mm,
move back to eco spirituality, and it was very much an indictment of where materialism had led us and a return to deeper humanism. And Like there's so much like the Church of All Worlds, which is a huge or not huge, it's been around a long time. It's as large,
Yeah.
I think, as a pagan organization can get at
Hmm.
various points. But they are named after the church in Stranger in a Strange Land. And like even today, like if you know anything about AI, Grok, Grok is a major AI system, and it pulls its name from Stranger in a Strange Land, and that is to know something completely and utterly. So yeah, it's this book is one of those things nobody knows about, but knows something about.
Right. And it's, if you've never read it, it can be a dry read, but I highly recommend that you read it. One of my students got hung up for their first degree by not reading this book. And finally she read it. We were able to give her her first degree. She complained about it the whole time. She lived out in San Francisco and got invited to a Gardnerian meeting where the Gardnerian, American Gardnerian historian was going to speak. And the first thing that Gardnerian historian said was, "Who has read Stranger in a Strange Land?" And my student raised her hand, and she was the only one who had read it. And then the priestess followed up with, "Do you know why it's important?" And she was able to explain what we've just explained and why it's important.
Yeah.
And then they asked who her teacher was. I was very proud. I was like, yeah, that's right. Got to read Stranger in Strange Land. It's a really good one. And I mentioned earlier John and Caitlin Matthews. I could not remember their name. John and
Yeah.
Caitlin Matthews, anything to do with Celticism, get their books. And they have some scholarly books that are really good. They also have some kind of new agey fluffy stuff, but the scholarly books are very, very good. I have all of their scholarly books and love them. John and Caitlin Matthews about Celtic anything. So that's Beltane. I think we covered it.
Yeah.
Litha is Sun at 1 degrees Cancer, June 20th to the 21st. And what's Litha about?
So Litha is also midsummer. So this is the longest day of the year. And it is, depending on where you live, a very bright, very beautiful day. It can also be very hot, like melt your face off hot, because I'm from
Mm-hmm.
Florida. And we would, not gonna lie, I cannot remember a single midsummer celebration that did not involve playing with water guns or a pool somewhere, because if you didn't, you would just die. It was too
Mm-hmm.
hot.
Mm-hmm.
The I do have a beef with this one though. I do, and I've tried to get over it, but my brain will not let me let it go. Litha means rock. Litha means rock.
Mm.
Now, one of my previous teachers had a bee in her bonnet about it, and normally I don't get that pedantic. That's a lie. I Litha means rock, and we're not 100% sure where it came from, but the closest thing that I've been able to figure is this is the time in the Norse lands, like that Germanic Norse influence that, kind of came down in the British Isles at the end of conquest. Um, that's when they till their ground. And Iceland, Norway, Denmark, they are very rocky places. They were formed from volcanic and tectonic movements, so very rocky. So I imagine just a whole bunch of Norse farmers just yelling rock and Icelandic expletives for much of that season, and that's maybe where it came from. But it's basically midsummer. It's the summer solstice.
Yeah, if you think of Midsummer's Night Dream, fairies are heavily involved in Litha. And so this is the celebration of fairies. I also consider it the first harvest because this is the time you're harvesting herbs. So early spring herbs are coming in about this time, at least in the South. So for me, it definitely is for me the first harvest, the harvest of herbs. My favorite ritual I ever performed was a Litha ritual. And it was done at a big gathering. And I partnered with the University of Georgia Pagan Student Union Group. And they came out. I told them what I wanted to do, and they took it 200% plus. I wanted them to be the fairies in a fairy ritual. So we would have people who were the priest and priestess, but then there would be fairies, and the people would pretend you couldn't see the fairies. So what they did is set up blinds in the woods and hid an hour before this ritual. and waited. And then when they called the east, the air fairies with butterfly wings and dancing and wearing bells all over them came out of the east, and it was like, ooh, ah. Well, one of the things that you're supposed to do for fairies is leave out honey and buttermilk. And in the South, if you leave out buttermilk for any length of time, it curdles. And so the fairies descend into the circle, they gather around the offering. One fairy, male fairy, picks up the buttermilk, just chunks it back, and then promptly spits it out all over because it was sour. And that led to a whole thing that transcended from this. On the altar, if you can imagine, we had a whole bunch of wine bottles open, ready to do cakes and ale. And there were flowers. It was a beautiful altar. And the next thing I hear is fire, fire. And I turn around just in time to see a fairy taking off with a wine bottle, just swigging it down, trying to get that sour milk out of his mouth. And he had knocked over a candle and caught this big, beautiful Litha floral arrangement on fire. So I ran over there, I grabbed the flowers, I threw them on the ground, I stomped them out, and I went, damn fairies. And then I went back to the ritual because I wasn't supposed to see them. But it's still one of, if I could do that again, I would love to do that. But it's very people heavy. To do really good rituals like that, you need a lot of people and a lot of moving parts. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do when you're a little tiny group of 13. But we have done fairy rituals where everybody showed up as fairy, and it was chaos. And I swore I would never do it again.
You remember, when you're running that energy is going to run you. And if you invite them in, we made a mistake one year of calling in Ratatas.
Oh no.
So for those who don't know who Ratatas is, in the world tree of Yggdrasil, at the very top, there is a rat. Well, there's an eagle, and then there's various other animals. But one of the denizens, one of the creatures living on Yggdrasil, is this rat, Ratatas, and he will basically tote tails. He is a stirrer and will run from the top to the bottom, just tote tails and create all kinds of chaos. And if you need an idea of his energy, watch over the hedge. The squirrel in that is similar to the energy that he can bring to a circle. So just, be aware of what you're bringing in, because they have their own energy, their own essence, and they will bring it into your space.
So I totally thought you were talking about the wizard and Tolkien. What is
Radagast.
it?
Yeah.
Radagast. That's what I thought you were talking. I was like, why would you call Radagast? It's very interesting.
I mean,
I have just
put it past me, but
yeah, I have just identified myself as a huge nerd. And I'm red as a beet.
Self-awareness is really, it's so rewarding.
Yes, it is.
One thing that we haven't talked about, which I just realized, and I made a note of myself last time, we started talking about popular Wiccan culture mythos. So the life cycle of the goddess and god. We haven't touched on that this time, at least not directly. So for those who maybe haven't heard the last time, there is this concept of the wheel of the year as kind of the life cycle of the Lord and Lady for those who practice dualism, binary masculine, feminine worship. Imbolc is when basically the seed of the sun has come back. Yule is all about that deep rest and the idea of the god's return. Imbolc, there is a quickening of life, and then things get heavier at Beltane, and the god has since been born, and now at midsummer, the goddess is pregnant with the offspring of the god. And so that's kind of where we are. I wanted to catch us up there because it had totally slipped my mind.
Right. And the other one is the Holly King and the Oak King. And so at Yule, you see the Oak King is born, and then he's growing up so that he's strong enough to impregnate the goddess. And that's kind of what's happening there. And then we'll see that turnover again at Lughnassadh, which is the next Sabbath. It's sun at 15 degrees Leo, or August the 1st. And Lughnassadh is where the god, the Oak King, dies so that there's a guarantee of a fertile harvest. and the Holly King takes over to bring in that harvest. So the idea is you always have a strong male who's able to perform the duties that are necessary at that time of year. But Lughnassadh is also known by some as Lammas, and I don't use that term because it actually means loaf mass, and it is a
Catholicized.
Catholicized word. Lammas is a Catholicized word. It means loaf mass, and it's what they took because you make bread at this time of year. The wheat is ready to be harvested. This is for some the first harvest. It's for me, and in the South the second harvest, and that's what's happening. But the more important mythos around Lughnassadh has to do with the god Lu and his stepmother, whose name I can never pronounce. So Kyler, what is her name? Telcha. So
I think so. Again, consonants and vowels, they get a little squirrely, a little Ratatas there. I believe it's Telcha.
Telcha.
I'm probably very wrong.
So she's a stepmother, and we didn't explain this last time, but in the Celtic culture, it was not unusual to send your son or daughter to go live with an aunt or somebody else and learn from them and spend a significant amount of time. And this is what happens to Lu. He goes, and his stepmother becomes Telcha, and she eventually ends up giving her blood and her sweat and tears to ensure the harvest for his people and to make sure that it's fertile. And so he decides to host these games in honor of her, and you would know these as the Highland Games, the throwing of the tabor and the hammer toss, and all of those men in kilts swinging around. That's comes directly out of this myth, and so it's a very important time. And one of the things my coven has done is do yard games in honor of Telcha. And because Lu was, we talk about jack of all trades, master of none, and Lu was master of all trades. He could do anything, and he could do it better than anybody else. That's part of his mythos. And so we would play games to see who would be the best at cornhole or croquet or whatever. Horseshoes. We actually played horseshoes one year. So whatever game you could think of, games are a good honor. And last year we played throw the burrito. It's a board game, and it involves a stuffed burrito that you throw at people, and it's so much fun. So I highly recommend it. We played that indoors because it was so hot. We decided to do board games instead of being outside because it was so unbearably hot. But we've also before done, we did a capture the flag one year where we had water balloons that I made with a certain type of yarn. So I had crocheted water balloons, so they were reusable. And then everybody got a bucket of these crocheted water balloons, and then there was a flag on either end of the field, and the goal was for you to get to the other side without getting hit by a water balloon, and get the flag and then get it back without being hit. So it was this whole thing. Nobody won, by the way. There was no winning in this game. It was all about getting wet and not being hot. That's what it was about.
This is one of those games where if you had won, you had lost.
Right. Yes.
Too hot. The South is a wonderful place that feels like the surface of the sun. There was another thing about Midsummer. For those who are Norse or who incorporate the Norse into their practice, Balder, the god Balder,
Oh yeah.
is often celebrated at this time because this is when he was traditionally sacrificed and then is reborn at Yule. So if that's the way you lean, that is something else. So it's all about summer and hot and fun and games, and you really should look at Lu's myths. His stories are really fun. Lughnassadh is like the coolest guy.
Yeah, he really is.
Oh yeah.
So after Midsummer, we move ourselves into Mabon, which is an equinox. So the
Mm-hmm.
day and night are equal. This is September 21st or 22nd, or the sun is at 1 degree Libra.
Mm-hmm.
And Mabon is named for a god called.
It is. This is going to surprise you, Dia. I may have a small rant about Mabon. So I know, shocker. So Mabon basically just means son of the mother. So yes, technically it's the name of a god, but it's really more of a title for a god. We don't actually know who they were referring to. So there's Mabon and Madrone, and Madrone basically means mother, and Mabon means son of the mother. So we don't 100% know. When these were kind of being pulled together, you got centuries of cultural drift, and then Gardner kind of sometimes kind of ad hoc things in. So we don't really know where Maven came from 100%. And if you do, by all means, I will toss it. I did last time. There's a lot of cultural specificity when it comes to the Sabbats. Nobody I have ever heard teach a class on this has gotten everything right. I certainly don't think I will be the first. So if you have information on anything I say I don't know about, please reach out to us at urbanunwitches@gmail.com and let me know your sources and let me know what it is because that will make my whole day. Uh,
Well, what we also call this the witches' Thanksgiving.
it is, yeah. In the UK and in a lot of traditions, it's called Harvesttide.
Right. So what you're celebrating is the abundance,
Mm,
and during this time agriculturally and ancient agriculturally, there was a lot of food that needed to be baked into bread
mhm,
or needed to be put up for the winter. This was the time of year in the South when we would actually harvest corn,
mhm,
believe it or not, because the seasons are so much later here in the South than they are in other places. And we would have corn canning days where my whole family would get together and somebody would shuck and somebody would get the silk off and somebody would put it into a pot and then they'd wait a little while and boil it in this big pot outside and then they would can it and then everybody would go home with corn for the rest of the year. And so that was one of my pivotal memories growing up, was doing these corn canning days around this time of year every year. um, so, and which also is around the time of year for watermelon down here, just for the record.
mhm.
So,
Now you're talking
it,
my childhood. I was
yeah, I bought some
pre-Laban.
watermelon today. I'm very excited about it. I'm going to have that later. But yeah, so watermelon traditionally happens between August 1st and September 21st. That's the high time for watermelon here. So just so you know, if you ever wondered, and I'm in Georgia, by the way. So which is Thanksgiving? My coven always just had Thanksgiving. What did you guys do?
Much the same. It's really a focus on what we're thankful for. Last time, in our previous now being redone podcast half, I talked about this was the first time we did a dining with the elements,
Oh
and
yeah.
it was for a Harvesttide. And dining with the elements is, if I'm remembered for anything, I hope it is people's love of dining with the elements, because it has never failed to just carry the day. Basically, we have a four-course meal. Each course, and we change it up every time we do it, each course is an elemental focus with the elemental admixtures. So if, say, your first course is appetizers, that might be air. And so they'll be light and fluffy or be heavily flavored with lemon, something sharp, something that connects, ideologically with the concept of air's elemental psychology. But then you also have the air of fire, or the fire of air, the water of air, the earth of air, and the air of air. So like you would have like little pastries, and one might be spicy, the other one might be squishy, or even like a soup pastry, like those soup dumplings that you can get. There's lots of
Mhm.
different variations. One year we did the earth course was the main course, and I did a beef burgundy, and so that's got a heavy sauce to it. So that was the water, but then I also added a bit of spice, and so it had that fire in there too. And then it had root vegetables. I added root vegetables to the burgundy, and it was super good. But the whole thing is done quietly. So it's done by candlelight. Once it starts, you create your sacred space. People come to the table. The person who's preparing has one or two helpers, and then everyone is served. And there's a different beverage with each meal or with each course. and you are not allowed to speak the entire time. The idea is you can feel everything of the nourishment, the love, the energy that went into the creation of that food, filling you and nourishing you afterwards. And it is just a wonderful experience. And it takes me 2 days to recover from it.
Well, and if you haven't noticed, Kyler's a bit of a foodie and he's really, really good at cooking, really good. I could not do this because I lack the skill at cooking to pull something like this off. But one of the things that it just reminded me of was the candy ritual, which is something that is in my ability to do. The candy ritual, you get candy that is related to the four elements. So cotton candy is in air, and then fire would be red hots or anything that has that spice to it. And then for water, I always did gushers, fruit gushers, because you put them in your mouth and chew them and you had that burst of water. Sometimes I would do literal water, just give out water because there's so much sweet going on. You need that to balance it out. And then in earth, we always did an apple because that's a traditional symbol of earth, but it also is a traditional symbol of witchcraft. And so it just made it, and it balanced out all the sugar that was going on in the candy ritual. But I've done that many, many times. And that's it. That's one that's obtainable for those of us who can't cook a 4-course meal. I'm just saying.
I feel pointed out, do you?
What did you say?
I said I feel pointed out. I feel exposed.
You should be, because you are a great cook, and I'm never sad when Kyler is cooking, ever.
Oh, thank you. I can
You're
definitely say
welcome.
my handles are not glandular. I have earned them.
So that's Mabon or Mabon, which is Thanksgiving, and we've come all the way around to Samhain, where the sun is at 15 degrees Scorpio, or October 31st. And did we do Samhain last time? We're going to do it again.
I think we, well, so the problem is we did, but was it in the first half or the last half? That's what I can't remember.
I don't know. And this is a good thing to bring up because is the beginning of the new year. When is the beginning of a witch's new year? That was the question.
Yes, that is how we started last time. So we did it at the beginning of
So we
last
did it
time.
at the
Yeah,
beginning.
we did. Because we talked about the wild hunt and we talked about when is the beginning of the new year, and we talked about, we didn't actually bring up dusk. Of all the things that we didn't talk about last time, we didn't bring up the whole dusk component of it for Samhain. Because a lot of traditions, Samhain happens at dusk, which was for Celtic peoples a very liminal time. It was when dusk happened, when you had the sun right above the horizon. That was the moment of a day's death and the moment of the new day's birth and all that. Somehow we talked about everything else last time. We didn't bring that up.
And it's interesting that we would forget that because the stone circles all are keyed to a certain time of year when the sun is at a very specific place in the sky, and it shines through two keyhole stones and then shines on what would have been the altar space. So it's interesting that we would totally forget that, because that's what Stonehenge is for, one of the equinoxes, right?
So Stonehenge is actually like a giant celestial calendar.
Right.
So it's not just the one time, like you can track lots of different things. And if all the stones were still there, you could track like a lot more, but many of them have fallen down. And from what I understand, they may be restricting access to the site for future
Yes.
solstices and equinoxes because people don't really know how to act when they go there. They kind of trash it. And this is a megalithic Paleolithic site, y'all. Like, it's been here for thousands and thousands of years. You wouldn't go leave trash on the Great Pyramids. So I don't know why that's a problem because we're pagan, but we should love nature.
It's a
But
problem.
it's a problem because we're
It's a
talking about
problem.
graffiti too. Like, people have graffitied the stones.
One of the other things that I wanted to cover when you talk about the Wheel of the Year is that the reason we celebrate the Wheel of the Year has to do with the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. And those cycles are in us all, and we're all a part of that cycle at some place. So I am a woman of a certain age, which means old. And So I would be more at the Lughnassadh Mabon of my life, so to speak. Kyler is a little bit younger. He's still more in the midsummer Beltane of his life. So the idea is that as you go through and look at these, and we could take Samhain since we're talking about it. It's the celebration of for a family coven, which is a term that I use to represent families that live together and practice the craft together. But it's the celebration of witchiness and preparing for the holiday hype, which would be the celebration of Yule. It's for children, the age is 15 to leaving the Covenstead. So that's the age that we say children are at if they're in the Samhain of their life. The spiritual lesson is about death of families and how those can live on as you allow them to live on in your heart and in your mind and in what you speak. And then for partners, it's a time of retirement or grave illness and death. And it's the spiritual lesson of retirement, death, and an empty nest, especially something that I've dealt with in the past 2 years. So I point this out because this isn't just a fun time to have lots of holidays and get together, although that is part of it. But I pointed out because there is an actual reason for the celebration and a reason for the noticing of these times in our lives. And I think it's important that we not lose sight of that. So that's what I have to say about that.
And well said it was.
Okay, so we have done it. This has wrapped up all of the Sabbats.
In the future.
Favorites, favorite Sabbath memory, Kyler, go.
Favorite Sabbath memory was a ritual we did in Florida. It was a wild and crazy night. We went all out for this one. We wanted to have just the best time that we could. Our group had been there for a while. Everybody knew what they were doing, and we had finally really come together as a community. So I wrote a ritual where instead of doing the traditional Wiccan circle, we did the three gates. And so the idea of three land, sea, and sky is what we called instead of walking the circle three times. So we kind of borrowed from ADF Anriach Fane, the Druidic practice, and we did land, sea, and sky. And we had three gates, and we had three different priestesses call down different faces of old fate. And each person would walk through and they would go and speak. And the different faces of fate would give them different messages. And several people walked away from that night with a whole different perspective on situations they've been dealing with. But one of the coolest things about this, which is completely just flash, no substance, all flash. We had spent several months playing around with different powders to get colored fire. And so we had a 6-foot tall, maleficent green fire coming out of a giant cauldron, because why not? It was amazing. It cast exactly the right ambience. I have never felt more beautiful, more witchy, more powerful. It was wonderful. Best memory / ever.
That's awesome. And mine is still going to be the fairies, the fairy ritual that I pulled off. It was pretty awesome. And I would love to do that ritual again with enough people involved. And my second favorite one is we did a death god at Samhain. So we had the 4 death gods, Anubis. Now I can't remember them. Hades was one. Anubis, Hades, and then 2 others that I can't off the top of my head remember because my brain is that way. But they had a conversation. And so it was a sacred drama where the 4 gods had this conversation about death and about what death means. And it led into a raising of energy. And I get goosebumps even now talking about it. It was very well done by the 4 gentlemen who played the 4 death gods. And it was really a really great ritual. And that's another one that if I could pull off doing it again, I would definitely do that. So those are my favorite. This leads us to Resiliency Corner. And I don't, again, have not thought of what to be resilient with. But what I will say is you have to find a way to unplug and renew. And I know I talk about LARP a lot, but I don't listen to my phone. My phone gets plugged in at the cabin, and I don't look at it again. I am totally unplugged. I am totally present in what's going on around me. And it leaves me, when I come back, in a whole better state of mind. So I'm not saying you have to LARP. I mean, it is a good way to go, but find time where you unplug and don't engage in the negative juice that's running our world right now, especially if you live in the States. You have to find that time to unplug and not be part of that. You just have to. What do you say, Kyler?
I say that for me, that this is a perfect topic for Wheel of the Year because the wheel turns. I'm a huge nerd, and I love to. One of my favorite series is Wheel of Time. Before it became a TV show, I had read all the books. I started reading them in middle school, read all the way through the 14th, and it always starts with the same intro. The Wheel of Time turns. Winds blow across the land. It is not the beginning of the wind. It is not the end. There are no beginnings. There are no endings with the Wheel of Time. The Wheel of the Year, I mean, so Robert Jordan, he was a very noted historian. He knew a lot of these concepts. And for me, the Wheel of the Year is the promise that no matter how bad things are, no matter how bright, no matter how low, the wheel turns. And if you look back in time in the 11th century in Europe, it was the Crusades, and it was like the end of the world, like it was endless war. And that was 1,000 years ago. And we've had bright points and dark points and ups and downs since then. I like to remind myself where I am in time and history, and remember that in 1,000 years, the problems that we have right now may seem very, very, very small. And so perspective for me, that's not going to work for everybody because it used to give me panic attacks to think about how time moves. But that for me is how I get through this. I'm reminded that no matter how dark the time, the light always comes again.
Yep. Samhain is always the darkest time of the year. Yule is the promise of the new sun. And I always think, we may be living in the longest night of the year, Yule, but the sun will rise. Mm-hmm. And that begins a whole new cycle of positivity. So I normally sign off with, have a magical day. How are you signing off today, Kyler?
Today, I'm going to say, cling fast to those you love and bathe in that joy and be absolutely blessed.
So mote it be.
Mote it be.
Thank you for listening to Urban Unwitches. Please reach co-host Kyler Petrie and Rev Dia at urbanunwitches@gmail.com. That's urbanunwitches@gmail.com to suggest topics for shows or comment on past episodes. Please join our Discord channel, Urban Unwitches Podcast. Follow us on TikTok at Urban Unwitches. Follow us on YouTube at Urban Unwitches to watch all episodes. And listen to all our past podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform. Rev Dia is a witch for hire as an officiant, life coach, astrologer, geomancer, and medium, and can be reached at www.revdia.net. See you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Circle Podcast, presented by Circle Sanctuary, and produced for all who follow nature-centered paths. Join us throughout the week for various programming connecting with the community around the world. Please don't forget to watch for updates on the Circle Sanctuary website at www.circlesanctuary.org. Follow us on Facebook at Facebook/Circle Podcasts. We can also be found on your favorite podcast hosting sites, such as iTunes, Spotify, and others. Until next time, many blessings.